9:47 a.m., Washington, D.C. Inside the Oversight Committee chamber, it felt like someone had pressed pause on reality. Not a breath, not a cough, not even the shuffle of papers, just silence. Dense, loaded, unnatural. The speaker's chair, the one with the polished bronze nameplate reading Speaker Mike Johnson, was still empty, and that alone was a message. The red tally lights blinked to life atop every camera. 1, then 2, then 5. They glowed like sniper sights trained not on bodies but on truth. C-SPAN, CNN, MSNBC, even Fox and YouTube's live stream. The numbers ticked up like a national pulse rising. This wasn't a hearing anymore. This was a waiting room for a storm. The kind of stillness that feels rehearsed, engineered, like the room had been scrubbed clean not of dust but of dissent. The staffers who usually whispered jokes across the aisle sat frozen, eyes on their screens, fingers hovering, not typing. The aides were quiet, too quiet. One clutched a legal pad so hard the cardboard creaked. Another kept glancing at the door like something, or someone, was about to walk through and change the course of the morning. And outside the lens, in a dozen living rooms across America, veterans, mothers, teachers, retirees leaned in closer. Even they could feel. There was something wrong with the air today. It wasn't nerves. It was anticipation, pressure. Like every molecule in that room was waiting for something to explode. The speaker, the man meant to lead, was missing. And in Washington, when the man in charge is late, it's not just rude, it's a warning. 9:49 a.m. The chamber doors opened slowly, soundlessly. No announcement, no fanfare, just the steady rhythm of heels. Click, click, click. Jasmine Crockett walked in like a verdict. Not a glance to the cameras, not a nod to her colleagues, just forward motion, deliberate, silent, inevitable. In her right hand, a black folder. No labels, no logos, no tabs. Just matte black and tightly sealed. It wasn't a prop, it was a warning. Her suit was simple, dark, crisp. But her eyes scanned the room not to see who was there, but to feel where the pressure lived. She didn't walk like a politician. She walked like someone who'd already seen the fire and come back with the ashes. Across the aisle, a GOP aide dropped a pen. A staffer reached for water and missed the cup. Tension was now visible in fingers, in jawlines, in the unnatural way people stopped blinking. One intern whispered, "She has it. It's in that folder." The room didn't breathe. Jasmine didn't stop. She reached her desk, paused, and placed the black folder flat on the table. Not with drama, but with surgical precision, like a surgeon setting down the scalpel before an impossible operation. Across the room, Mike Johnson's chair was still empty, but somehow, it felt like he'd already lost. The folder was still, but the tension wasn't. Somewhere near the third row, a whisper, soft, dry, laced with panic. "He's folding." The words didn't need volume. They carried weight. They slid across the chamber like a blade hidden in velvet. Congressman Burchett didn't look up, didn't move. Just leaned slightly toward his neighbor, lips barely parted, voice like paper tearing. He's shutting it down, before the vote, before she can read it. No one replied, but eyes shifted. Across the bench, a Republican aide subtly tapped their phone 3 times, then locked the screen. A cue, a signal, something was happening, something off the books, and Jasmine knew it. She didn't speak, she didn't raise her brow. She simply tapped her finger once on the folder, not loud, but deliberate. The message was clear. Don't even try, I already know. The temperature in the room dropped, not physically, but emotionally. You could feel it, the tremor behind the silence. Somewhere beneath the polished floors and staged microphones, a truth was screaming to surface. And Jasmine, she was already holding it. The folder hadn't moved, but now the cameras had. Slowly, cautiously, the C-SPAN feed tightened its focus. From a wide angle to a mid-frame, then suddenly full zoom. There it was, black, seamless, no seal, no title, no tabs, just silence shaped into a rectangle. And yet, it screamed. On screens across the country, viewers paused. Screenshots flew across Twitter. Reddit threads exploded. Facebook timelines lit up with shaky captions. What's in that folder? Is this about Epstein? Why is no one touching it? Zoomers, boomers, retired veterans, night shift nurses, everyone watching could feel it. This file wasn't a report. It was a trigger. The kind of thing that doesn't just inform, it exposes. And Jasmine, she wasn't even touching it anymore. She had placed it perfectly in frame. Not centered, no, just barely off to the side, intentionally casual, which somehow made it 10 times louder. One congressional aide texted just 3 words to a colleague. It's live now. The meaning was clear. Whatever they were trying to suppress was already spreading. 9:52 a.m. The door clicked, heads turned, and there he was, Speaker Mike Johnson, walking in like a man who'd already won a game he hadn't played yet. His tie was flawless, his suit dark navy, wrinkle-free, not a bead of sweat. He didn't look rushed, he looked rehearsed. The kind of walk that said, "I'm not late, I'm just perfectly timed." He didn't glance at the cameras. He didn't greet the chair. He didn't look at Jasmine. Instead, he adjusted his cufflink, then smirked. Like this was a boardroom, not a battlefield. Like he still owned the room. But the room didn't smile back. Not this time. Not after that folder had shown up. Staffers looked away. Photographers stopped clicking. One reporter froze mid-tweet, because while Mike Johnson smiled, the air no longer welcomed him. He sat down slowly, measured, intentional, trying to reassert dominance by simply being present. But even presence can feel hollow. And Jasmine, she didn't even blink. Her eyes never left the folder, as if to say, "You're already too late. The truth got here first." 9:54 a.m. The room was still adjusting to Mike Johnson's arrival when Jasmine Crockett stood. Not fast, not dramatic, just precise, like a trigger being pulled in slow motion. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't gesture wildly, she didn't have to. Her words did the detonating. "Madam Chair, I rise under House Rule 11C to introduce an emergency motion to review evidence of deliberate obstruction by Speaker Mike Johnson regarding the scheduled vote on the sealed Epstein files." Silence cracked, like glass under pressure. One person inhaled sharply, another dropped a pen. The room froze. Even the cameras jolted, shifting focus like they too weren't ready. On the GOP bench, shoulders stiffened. Staffers stopped typing mid-keystroke. A CNN reporter whispered off mic, "Oh my God, she went there." And Jasmine, still standing, calm, grounded, unshaken. Mike Johnson's smirk didn't falter, but his hands, they clenched slightly, under the desk. And that folder, still unmoved, still silent. But now, it had a voice, because Jasmine had just put it into the record. She didn't slam it down, she didn't wave it in the air, she lifted it slowly, like it weighed more than paper. Her fingers gripped the top corners. The bottom edge rested against the table, then rose. Enough for the room to see, enough for the cameras to lock in. Bold, stamped in red. Across the header, "Do not duplicate. Office of the Speaker, Strategic Memo, Internal Distribution Only." The room exhaled all at once, but not out of relief, out of shock. This wasn't just paper. This was a confession with a letterhead. And Jasmine, her voice was quiet, measured, like a surgeon explaining the incision. This document, she said, originates directly from the Speaker's office. It outlines coordinated steps to delay the vote and discredit those seeking transparency. Suddenly, every eye turned, not to Jasmine, but to Mike Johnson. His jaw tightened, his fingers curled against the armrest. He knew what was coming. The memo was real, and Jasmine had just flashed it in front of the nation. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The words she said next shifted the oxygen in the room. This memo, she said, holding the page steady, was exchanged between Speaker Mike Johnson's office and Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's personal criminal defense attorney. The air rippled. You could feel the tension snap like wires inside people's chests. Reporters sat upright. C-SPAN's live chat exploded. But Jasmine wasn't done. Todd Blanche, she continued, who now holds a senior position inside the Department of Justice. A beat. Gasps. Audible this time. Because it wasn't just dirty politics anymore. It was a federal conflict of interest. A hidden channel. From Trump to his lawyer to the Speaker of the House. A triangle of silence. And Jasmine had just turned the lights on. She leaned in. Not loud, not theatrical, just close enough for every mic to catch it. Is transparency seasonal, Miss? The words didn't echo, they cut. Clean, cold, unavoidable. Johnson blinked. Twice. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. No denial, no retort, no spin. Just a silence so loud it became the answer. Reporters stopped typing. C-SPAN's chat froze mid-scroll. It was a question with no escape route. And Jasmine knew it. She didn't need to shout to destroy him. She just asked the one question he couldn't afford to answer. C-SPAN's numbers spiked. 3.1 million watching. And rising. CNN cut in. MSNBC followed. Even Fox shifted from a weather alert. Every major network now live. Not for a vote, not for a speech, but for a silence and a black folder sitting on a desk. The shot stayed wide. Jasmine didn't move. Johnson didn't speak. And the world held its breath. Red tally lights blinked like warning signals. Then, "Speaker Johnson," Jasmine said softly, "you cannot recess your way out of the truth." Gasps returned. Not in the room, but across America. People in kitchens, cars, offices, hospital waiting rooms froze. The tension didn't break, it detonated. It started with a shuffle, a pen dropped, a throat cleared. Then Rep. Holloway glanced down at his binder, flipped 2 pages forward, then back again. For no reason. He wasn't reading, he was hiding. 2 rows back, another GOP rep tightened his tie, not because it was crooked, but because his neck was sweating. Someone else tapped their finger, then stopped, realizing the mic was live. The camera didn't move, but it noticed, and so did the public. Reddit, Twitter, YouTube. "Look at them squirm," someone posted. Even Rep. Burchett, who had warned Jasmine earlier, was now sitting completely still, like a man realizing the ship he was on had a hole and it just started taking water. Jasmine didn't shout. She didn't need to. She leaned forward, locked eyes with Johnson, and delivered the blow. "You don't get to demand truth in May and bury it in July." Silence. It wasn't a jab. It was a needle. Surgical, cold, precise. Johnson blinked. Somewhere behind him, a staffer coughed. Another scribbled something into a notebook, then tore the page out. The phrase echoed not through the chamber, but through the country. News tickers lit up. "You don't get to demand truth in May and bury it in July." Trending. quoting, repeating, as if America had just heard its own conscience speak. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She lifted the next document, heavy stock white paper, and held it up between two fingers like it was radioactive. At the top, internal planning timeline, stamped, confidential, Speaker's Office, June 12, 2025, 6:03 p.m. This document, she began, confirms Speaker Johnson's intent to halt floor proceedings not this morning, not last week, but back in June. She paused. The exact week Donald Trump's legal team first requested a hold on all Epstein-related disclosures. Across the aisle, two GOP aides whispered furiously. One left the room with a phone in his hand. Burchett stared at the floor. C-SPAN zoomed in on the date. Twitter froze it in 4K, June 12th. The moment the shutdown was conceived, not for order, not for procedure, but to protect a name. She didn't blink. Jasmine looked directly at Mike Johnson, her voice low but unshakable. "Is this," she began, holding the document up again, "how you define duty?" The room froze. Trading the truth for proximity to power. Letting the people you serve walk blindfolded while you whisper strategies with a man under federal investigation. Johnson's face stiffened. The lights above him suddenly felt hotter, brighter. He glanced sideways, but there was nowhere left to look. Jasmine stepped closer, one step, then another. "You've sworn the same oath I have. So tell me, Mr. Speaker." She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. "Is that oath conditional on who's watching, or does it die quietly when the cameras roll?" No one moved. Even the pages stopped rustling. For a moment, Washington held its breath. It took 9 minutes. Just 9. Hashtag seasonal speaker was trending nationwide from Vermont to Vegas. Not from pundits, not from politicians, from people. Americans watching live who had finally seen enough. They clipped the moment, shared the phrase, and lit up the internet. "You don't get to demand truth in May and bury it in July." The quote echoed across timelines, newsrooms, and front pages. CNN aired it. Fox froze on Jasmine's face. MSNBC zoomed in on Johnson's hands trembling. Even TikTok had memes within the hour. A seasonal speaker caught out in the cold. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Jasmine held the memo at eye level and read it word by word. "Delay floor vote. Redirect media toward border crisis. Subdue Crockett via procedural challenge." Every syllable struck like a gavel. Gasps broke the silence. Across the aisle, even seasoned aides froze. Burchett lowered his head. A GOP rep scratched his temple so hard he drew blood. Jasmine turned the page slowly. "Do not duplicate. Circulate only within Speaker's Council. All references to Epstein file must remain verbal, not written." Her tone remained surgical, precise, like a scalpel cutting through deception. "This is not interpretation," she said. "This is instruction." And now the instruction manual was public. He reached for the mic, hand trembling. "Madam Chair, I move that we recess immediately." His voice cracked. It was the most powerful man in the House asking for a timeout, like a schoolboy caught cheating on the final exam. Jasmine didn't flinch. The room didn't move. Every camera zoomed in. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, even YouTube's live stream had crossed 4 million. The speaker had just blinked, and the country saw it. Behind him, a Republican aide whispered urgently. Burchett shifted in his seat. Chairwoman Esparza held her breath. "Recess denied," she said calmly. "The motion is under review." But it didn't matter anymore, because the whole nation just watched Mike Johnson try to run. And Jasmine, she wasn't done. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't look at Johnson, she just slid the page across her desk into the light, where millions were watching. "Final exhibit," she said, "an internal email." The camera zoomed in. It was printed, highlighted. At the bottom, "We must protect the base. Transparency threatens the outcome of Q3 fundraising." The room exhaled like it had been punched. This wasn't about timing. It wasn't about procedure. It wasn't about national security. It was about money and votes and the fear of losing both. Jasmine sat back, folded her hands, and said nothing more. She didn't need to. Jasmine leaned forward, calm, controlled, and lethal. She pressed a single button on her desk. The overhead projector came alive with a mechanical click. A slide appeared on the screen behind her. Text, dated, time-stamped, and sourced. "Mike Johnson, I'll block it. Crockett won't be allowed on the floor if she holds that file." Gasps weren't heard, they were felt. The text glowed behind her like a confession etched in fire. No speculation, no paraphrasing. His exact words. Jasmine turned to the chair. "Let the record reflect," she said, "that the Speaker of the House attempted to preemptively silence a sitting member of Congress for carrying the truth." The chamber was no longer tense. It was paralyzed. Reporters stopped tweeting. Viewers stopped blinking. Because now the question wasn't just, what did he hide? It became, what else has he silenced? Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room was already holding its breath. She turned slowly to face Speaker Mike Johnson. His eyes locked on the screen behind her. His face, pale, jaw clenched, hands no longer steady. Jasmine's tone was soft, but it cut like glass. "Mr. Speaker, do you still think silence is harmless?" Not a ripple in the chamber, not a shuffle, not a cough. Just the weight of the question, one that pierced decades of excuses, cover-ups, and performative patriotism. Johnson blinked, but said nothing. Jasmine stepped away from the mic, and in that quiet space, the silence was louder than any gavel, because the truth had been spoken, not shouted, spoken and impossible to unhear. The American people saw the fear in his posture, the guilt in his stillness, and for the first time in a long time, they saw who really ran the chamber. No applause, no headlines shouted in real time, no backpats or cheers, just quiet. Jasmine Crockett closed the folder. Her fingers lingered on the black cover as if sealing shut something ancient and heavy. Then she stood, gathered her papers, straightened her jacket, and walked out. No glance back, no dramatic gesture. Only the soft, steady sound of her heels echoing down the marble hallway. Behind her, the chamber sat stunned. Even the air seemed afraid to move. The speaker hadn't said a word since. America was still watching, not just on screens, but in gas stations, waiting rooms, kitchens, airports. In all 50 states, people were holding their breath, not because they were afraid, but because somehow they knew this moment was not the end. It was the crack in the wall, and Jasmine had been the first to swing the hammer. In a world where silence often protects the powerful, truth needs someone brave enough to speak, even if it means standing alone. Jasmine Crockett reminded us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in quietly, holding a black folder. Transparency, justice, and integrity aren't seasonal. They are choices, daily ones, and every generation must choose them again and again, because when one voice speaks up, millions more find the strength to follow. If this story made you pause, question, or feel something real, don't just scroll. Stand with truth. Subscribe to this channel because we don't just tell stories, we expose what others bury. And this is only the beginning. Tap that subscribe button. Let's hold power accountable together.